Welcome the director, Amy Berg, along with producers Damien Echols and Lorri Davis, and our special guest, Henry Rollins. Amy, let me start with you. What was your entryway into this story?
I got involved after all of the evidence was produced to the court in 2007, and it was denied immediately. So Fran and Peter and Lorri and Damien approached me, and we started talking.
Henry, since you're standing right here, let me ask you. I mean, of the many different causes there are that are worthy of support, what stood out to you about this one to give your time to?
I saw the three guys were at least denied their First, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment rights. They didn't get due process. And I saw a lot of myself in the three of them. But ultimately, I realized that if a lot of people didn't get up and put a heavy shoulder into this, they're going to salt away in prison for the rest of their life, and Damien could face lethal injection. And so I got sincerely angry. And when I get angry, I get very, very active. And when I'm sincerely angry, like they got me. And so I said, well, Arkansas, I'm coming. And I just worked myself into this state of unrelenting fury, and I went forward.
Damien and Lorri, there's been a lot of coverage of this story, books, other films, newspaper articles, etc. What makes this one stand out for you?
For one thing, this was the first time that we ever got to participate in telling our own story. You know, the other documentaries, other books, TV shows, newspaper articles, they were always from an outside perspective, you know, always what someone else saw from the outside looking in. And for us, this was our chance to actually sort of show some from the inside looking out. There was that, and there was also working with Amy. You know, she got people who have always refused to talk to anyone to open up and talk to her. The judge, the prosecutor, you know, people like that in the past have always adamantly refused to even speak about the case in public, and she got them to open up and talk about it.
Lorri, it's been a year and a few months since Damien's been out of prison. Can you talk about, you know, where Damien speaks at the end of the film about looking forward, wanting to move forward. Can you talk about how it is now in your life moving forward?
Well, it's a little bit overwhelming. A lot has happened in the last year, but we're trying to make a life for ourselves and settle down into a home if we can ever be there for longer than 2 or 3 days, but that'll come. Damien has published a book called Life After Death, which has done well and thank you. So all in all, we're working really hard, but it's just so wonderful and lovely to have him out here with us.
What are the other guys? Yeah, I know you're doing this, but what are the other gentlemen doing? Or how are they doing?
Can you talk about Jesse and Jason?
From what I've heard, Jesse has severed all contact with the outside world. He, you know, he only had an IQ of between 68 and 72 to begin with, and then going through all of this psychologically scarred and traumatized him on an incredibly deep level. So from what I've heard, he never leaves his house, never talks to anybody, never does anything because he's terrified they're going to find some way to put him back in prison. Jason right now is in Seattle. He's currently enrolled in college. What he wants to do is get his law degree and be able to help people who are in the same situation that we are or were.
But he can't.
Yeah, you can't really do that, though. You know, that's one of the reasons that we're pushing so hard for an exoneration, because it still reaches into so many aspects of our lives. Even today, if he were to graduate and have his law degree, he still could not practice law with a criminal record.
Can you talk about where the movement is now for exoneration? You know, what else can be done? What can other people do if they are so moved?
Well, a lot of it is still about spreading the word, you know, just asking people, please watch the documentary, please read the book, please research the case. If you know anything at all, or anybody you know knows anything, call the tip line. We still try to get that out there as much as possible. The actual process we're going through right now for the exoneration, everything falls on us completely 100%. According to the state of Arkansas, this case is over forever. It's closed. So everything that's going to be done from here on out is going to be us doing it. You know, there are things like we're currently engaged in a lawsuit with the FBI and the West Memphis Police Department because it was found out that they have 200 pages of documents that no one has ever even seen before. When we asked to see them, hoping that maybe there's some more leads or something in them that we can follow up on, the West Memphis Police Department and the prosecutor's office said, no, they don't need these documents, this case is closed. So right now we're suing the FBI to try to get this information. There have been a lot of other things that didn't pan out. You know, for example, we tracked down the truck that Terry Hobbs had at the time of the murders. He sold it within like 3 weeks of the time the children were murdered. Was that it, 3 weeks?
It was less than that.
Less than 3 weeks. It took a long time to find it. When we did find it, all the VIN numbers had been filed off of it. And we did luminol testing. It's a form of testing that shows if there's been blood spilled anywhere. It showed that there had been blood spilled in his truck, but it was so old and degraded that they couldn't type it or say who it belonged to anymore. They did the same thing inside the house he lived in at the time of the murders, and they found blood under the linoleum in the kitchen floor. But once again, it was so old and degraded that there was nothing they could do with it. It couldn't be typed. So we're still doing everything we possibly can to push this case forward.
Henry, you sat here and watched the film with the rest of the audience. You've been following this case for a long time. I wonder, you know, what you take away from this telling in the film.
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. The takeaway for me is how unbelievable Amy was in making this documentary, in that that's a lot of work. That's one of the most arduous documentaries I've ever seen in construction. That's so many interviews, that's so many miles, so many lawyers, and a state that does not want to let go one drop of information, male ego being what it is. And so she is stronger than all of us put together to bring something that strong to bear. And also, Peter Jackson really stepped up with an incredible amount of power. He didn't have to do this. He is obvious, he's very sincere about it. Sitting watching it, it made me go back to a lot of feelings I went through. As someone on the outside, not sitting in a box every day like the three, you still feel this emotional pull. I'm talking to Lorri all the time. I went out, I made this album. I took my bandmates around the world on this tour. It's 2 years of my life doing that, and tapped all my cool friends to give money, and I kept doing benefits. So I never kind of stopped this thing. And you keep getting this bad news. And the years go by, and you realize it's not going to be the Hollywood ending. And so it becomes this thing that makes you ache. And watching the documentary, I started aching again, and it hurt to watch because it's so good. And so there's just a lot of bravery involved, and it's very inspiring. But it takes me back to the idea that they weren't getting out. And so Lorri and I would speak, or we'd write each other, and I go, this is going to work out. This is going to work out. And I'd say to myself, I don't know if that's true, but I'm not letting that idea go away. And so watching this today, I hope, I would like to see that Arkansas would have the strength to face itself and deal with this case. I don't have much confidence in that.
Amy, if there was another interview that you could do or get someone to talk that you weren't able to, who would that be?
Oh my goodness. I think Brent Davis was somebody that I was always interested in speaking to. He was the lead prosecutor during the time. It's a toss-up between him and Frank Peretti, I would say, because there were just so many things that we were hearing that were reported that we just couldn't verify. There was a connection between Brent Davis and the Hobbs family that went way back because he was the prosecutor. Terry Hobbs' father had a catfish restaurant, and they used to hang out and eat at the restaurant together. There were just a lot of things. I wanted to know more about the lake knife. I mean, how in the world did that even go as far as it did? And I felt like there was some collusion there with Brent and Mike Allen. I don't know. There were a lot of people that wouldn't talk, but there were a lot of people that did talk, so thank goodness.
There is a great deal of good that has come out of this situation, just about on every level of my life. I don't know if it's always a fair trade or a balanced trade or not, but there have been some tremendous gifts given to me because of this. One is my relationship with Lorri. So many people that I've met that have become really great friends, and just it's like you've seen the best of humanity and also the worst of humanity. You know, seeing Henry, who's out there every single day when we couldn't even afford to pay for DNA testing, he's going on tours just to raise the money to pay for the DNA testing. Eddie Vedder, who used to come and sit with me at the prison while I was on death row. You know, we've met so many good people that have been just huge blessings in our lives, and they've added to it in ways that I could never even articulate.
You know, can you talk about some of the hurdles you had to overcome in different aspects of gaining access in this film?
Yeah, everyone that was extremely difficult was difficult because they had disappeared, they had drug issues. Finding them was a challenge, and then getting them to trust me was a greater challenge. But I tend to not show up with the camera. I tend to try to find out what someone's story is and remain within you know, a short proximity to where they were, which is living in Memphis at the time. We were living there for quite some time, and just showing them that we were there to find the truth. We weren't there to just get a soundbite out of them. And it worked. It worked on pretty much every level. Michael Carson and Cindy Hobbs were definitely the most dangerous situations I put myself in. But Cindy Hobbs had a baseball bat literally like 3 feet away from her during the entire interview, and she kept eyeballing it when I would ask her certain questions. She had chased us down the street the first time, and then eventually decided that she needed to speak on her brother's behalf. And Michael Carson was just getting sober, and he was just very angry at the time. And then after months passed, he started realizing the consequences of his testimony. And I think sobriety was helping him to get a conscience and do the right thing. So hopefully that answers you.
Question was about the witnesses that came forward in January 2012 and your choice in discussing that in the film before talking about the Alford plea.
Well, first of all, the reason we put it where we put it is just for storytelling purposes. There was just no more emotional energy that we could expend after the Alford plea. So it needed to be edited there because the ending was the ending, and we didn't want to take anything away from their ending. In terms of where it's at, the prosecutor has interviewed those witnesses. He's assigned somebody to investigate the family. Then he announced he was running for Congress, which slowed things down a little bit. But then he just lost last week, so we're back on the phone with him again. He is saying he is committed. We've been screening the film. We've been offering it for free in Arkansas for 2 months. Numerous tips have come into the West Memphis Police Department. They won't give anybody any of that information. So I think that this is going to be a big year for this case, and I think we haven't really seen what's going to happen yet, but I think that there's going to be some action, I'm hoping. And we're committed to staying on it. We're on it all the time, so that's what we're going to do.
I want to thank you for coming out, and I want to thank especially for making a trip from out of town to Damien and Lorri and Amy and Henry Rollins. Thanks very much.